Ladies and gentlemen, good morning to everyone and welcome to the 2020 edition of the Cooperation Forum. This event, as you know, is organized in the framework of the 6th edition of Rome Med. Rome Med is a high-level initiative, annual high-level initiative promoted by the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, by the Italian Institute for International Political Studies, with the aim to collect new ideas and suggestions and to draft a new positive agenda for the Mediterranean area. This Cooperation Forum, the one we are going to hold this morning for the 4th consecutive year, is organized by the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, by ISPI, the International Political Studies Institute, and the Mediterranean Agronomic Institute of Bari, and the acronym is CIHEAM Bari. Well, the topic we address today in this forum will be the health, agriculture, nutrition connection, Nexus in the Mediterranean area, in our area. In the midst of COVID-19 pandemic, most probably caused exactly by a zoonotic disease and worsened by environmental degradation, this link is of significant relevance. Over the past months, researchers claim that unsustainable development models have accelerated environmental degradation and the subsequent spillover of viruses, causing infection disease to arise and spread. In fact, the high pressure on ecosystems leads to major risks for plant, animal, and human health at the same time. Today, our distinguished panelists will be asked to provide their views on models, tools, methodologies, to address this question, this connection between health, agriculture, and nutrition in the Mediterranean region. We all look forward to hear their voice. Before starting the discussion, let me briefly explain you the way this morning will go on. The program. There will be an opening session with a welcome from the organizer of the forum, followed by a keynote speech by the representative of the World Food Programme. And afterwards, I will open the panel discussion with 4 speakers. They will get 2 questions each by me and one additional question in a Q&A session with the question that we have been received in from the audience in advance. Then we will move to the conclusion. I ask all of you, since time is very tight in this model of online discussion, to be extremely strict in their speaking time. Well, that's all for the moment. I will start the opening session with giving the floor to Emanuela Del Re. She's the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, and she will speak for 5 minutes. Please, the floor is yours, Emanuela.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Good morning to everybody. I want to, of course, extend my warmest greetings to Maurizio Raeli, the director of SIAM and friend, of course, and also send a special thank to ISPI and the Director General for Development Cooperation of the Italian Ministry for Foreign Affairs for contributing to the realization of the meetings. Good morning, Director General Marapodi. Dear friends, today's forum focuses on 3 issues that are at the core of the international development agenda: health, agriculture, and nutrition. Addressing this nexus requires a deep understanding of the complex relationship between human beings and ecosystems. This is a very timely topic because the pandemic we are currently facing made us all highly aware of the risks connected to an approach to this relationship that would not be based on sustainability. This forum will give us some perspectives for concrete solutions on sustainable development of the Mediterranean region based on the respect of its natural capital. It will also allow for a thorough discussion on the connections between animal and human health, in the Mediterranean region, possible strategies to contain and prevent the disruptive effects of the pandemic on the food supply chain, the key importance of diets and sustainable food systems to ensure a healthier development of societies and communities, policy coherence, awareness of risks and appropriate actions in order to minimize human infections by pathogens of animal origin need joint efforts at regional and national level. We should aim at integrated prevention of diseases by better understanding the effects of pathogens of medical and veterinary relevance. Unsustainable development models accelerate the spreading of pathogens. By putting a high pressure on ecosystems, they can potentially cause infectious diseases that affect human health. Agriculture can help improving people and communities' health through prevention of foodborne and zoonotic diseases. This is most cost-effective when addressed early in the food chain. Strengthening the surveillance of foodborne and zoonotic diseases in humans is critical to informing risk-based monitoring and action in agriculture. The COVID-19 pandemic has placed food production and the delivery process under an unprecedented stress, which is quite worrying. If we consider that food supply chains are amongst the most important sectors in the economy. In some cases, the policies adopted to contain the spread of the virus resulted in bottlenecks in value chains, as well as momentous shifts in demand. The greatest impact is on livelihood of smaller, older farmers and other supply chain actors, as well as vulnerable people. It also entails environmental and health implications, especially in developing countries. We therefore understand the critical importance of defining strategies to mitigate the effects of the pandemic on the food supply chain. Agriculture and food systems play a vital role when it comes to improving nutrition and health, especially with regard to the prevention of non-communicable diseases, which is one of the greatest health challenges we face. This is particularly relevant in low and middle income countries, where more than 3/4 of global NCD deaths, 32 million, occur. The promotion of research and information can lead to the production and distribution of safer and more nutritious food, which benefits the individual's well-being, thus contributing to healthy communities and economies. These are traditional core priorities for the Italian development cooperation, I am proud to say, well reflected in several initiatives supported by the Italian government. Amongst them, I am proud to mention the Food Coalition. Officially launched on November the 5th, the Food Coalition has kick-started a new phase in the global efforts to strengthen food systems, building on our ongoing commitment to keep on track towards the achievement of SDG 2, which is the elimination of hunger. The Food Coalition is also a global alliance to prevent the current health crisis from becoming a food crisis. In this regard, we look forward to the UN Food Systems Summit in 2021, and we deem pivotal the role played by the Rome-based agencies. The summit will offer solutions to adapt the current food systems deemed unsustainable in order to build back better from the COVID-19 crisis with a transformative ambition to achieve their sustainability, and Italy will host part of the preparatory activities for the Food Systems Summit in July 2021. Next year, we will play a leading role within the G20 presidency and the pre-COP26. The main goal we expect to achieve within this multilateral forum consists in setting the basis for a socio-economic recovery from the pandemic. However, we are aware that there will be no real recovery if our partners of growth and development remain unsustainable. While recognizing that the pandemic is not over, it is our duty to look beyond the immediate crisis. We must act for a sustainable, just and resilient recovery and for preparedness. It is our duty to come out of this emergency better than how we entered it, starting from firmly maintaining our 2030 horizon for the Sustainable Development Goals. Preparedness is key because we now know that we have to rethink our planet, especially that under the point of view of ecology and medicine. In my current position of being the Italian Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, it is my duty, it is my responsibility, it is my belief to stress once again that a healthier planet is also a safer, more prosperous and more peaceful planet. I believe that the Mediterranean region would be an ideal laboratory to start with, especially in this moment. And I want to quote Albert Camus in the very famous The Plague, when he said that in the depth of winter, I finally learned that there was in me an invincible summer. So to conclude, I want to say that I'm sure that your views will bring that summer, because you will give us concrete tools to ensure that the communities of the Mediterranean region, especially the most vulnerable ones, will improve their livelihood in a greener and healthier future. So the summer will come. Thank you very much.
Thank you to the Deputy Minister Del Re. And I will give now the floor to the second host of our forum, Maurizio Raeli, who has been since 2017 the director of Mediterranean Agronomic Institute of Bari. Please, Mr. Raeli.
Okay, can you hear me? Oh, okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Polito, for the floor, and thanks a lot for having accepted our invitation to chair this high-level meeting. Dear participants, first of all, I would like to say that it is a great honor for me to extend my welcome address on the occasion of this Cooperation Forum. And I also take this opportunity to deeply thank the other organizers, the Italian Institute for International Political Studies and the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, highly represented by the Deputy Minister Emanuela Del Re and by Giorgio Marapodi, Director General for Development Cooperation. And I believe that I'm persuaded that together we have established a fruitful relationship of trust and cooperation. I would like to express shortly, also in behalf of the organizers, my gratitude to the high-level and distinguished speaker who have accepted our invitation to join us this forum. Monique Loy, Director General of the World Organization for Animal Health, Marcella Villarreal from FAO, Bing Zhao from the World Food Programme, Ayoub El Jawalde from the World Health Organization, and last but not least, Stefano Scarpetta from the OECD. Ladies and gentlemen, in the past 3 editions of the Pre-Med Cooperation Forum, we organized talks addressing several important issues for the sustainable development of the Mediterranean region, going from the use of water and marine resources to humanitarian emergencies and climate change. And these editions have allowed us to spread ideas for the implementation of concrete initiatives, and also encouraged dialogue and opinion sharing among world organizations on the Mediterranean area, our region, a geopolitical, strategic, as you know, region in the world where our institute, but all our organizations, SIAM, have been operating since 1962. Nowadays, the Mediterranean and the world are facing a very hard challenge, which has forced us to rethink our way of life and development patterns. This is why, in agreement with the other organizers, we have decided to focus this meeting on the nexus between food, agriculture, and health. These three elements are in fact closely linked. Today, more than ever, the health and well-being of people and ecosystems must coexist and cannot be an alternative to each other. We all know that food, agriculture, their impact on human health are the key elements of the Mediterranean diet, recognized by UNESCO as intangible heritage of humanity 10 years ago. The Mediterranean diet guarantees good health through the food we eat and represents a pattern of sustainable development and biodiversity protection, as strongly reaffirmed in the Second World Conference on the revitalization of the Mediterranean diet, co-organized by our center and held in Palermo last year. The nexus between food, agriculture, and health requires a new, holistic and ecosystem-based approach with the support of different stakeholders. In this context, I think it is very important to underline that SIAM, FAO, and UFM, ahead of the UN World Summit on Food Systems next year in 2021, are now focusing on the Mediterranean sustainable food systems in line with One Health principles and our human pole approach. I believe it shall contribute to providing a coordinating response to the COVID-19 pandemic, which, as you know, is putting food supply chain under strain. In conclusion, dear Excellency Deputy Minister Del Re and Director General Marapodi and dear panelists, I'll be listening to your views and ideas with great interest, since you are strongly engaged in the sustainable and harmonious development of our region in its various facets. I expect that, as in previous edition, your contributions will be inspiring for concrete actions to be implemented in the near future. Furthermore, I hope that the recommendations coming up from this forum will lay the basis for the next important event that Italy is about to host, the G20, the United Nations Food System Pre-Summit, the Pre-COP26 dedicated to young people. And I now, before I give the floor to the chair, let me thank you again for your attendance and participation, and all the best for a successful meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Raeli. And now we go to the keynote speech of this morning, which will be held by Mr. Bing Zhao. Bing Zhao is the Director of Smallholder and Food System Support of the World Food Programme. Before serving for the World Food Programme, he was head of the Center for Sustainable Agricultural Mechanization of the United Nations. Before that, worked for the Chinese Ministry of Agriculture and served in the Chinese permanent representation to the United Nations agencies in Rome as alternate representative. Please, Mr. Zhao, the floor is yours. You have 10 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Polito, for your very kind introduction. Good morning to everybody, and Honorable Vice Minister Delere, distinguished representatives and panelists and colleagues. I first of all, of course, I wish to congratulate these pre-Med forum. It's a very important one. And so that's I'm very pleased to have been invited to speak and then also to listen about the nexus. We talk about the nexus between food, agriculture, and health in the Mediterranean region. And we all know that this region with its 21 countries is very well known for its diverse and ancient food cultures. And the Mediterranean diet is one of the healthiest in the world. But of course, it's also a region that faces challenges, as both Mr. Ray and Mr. Raeli have pointed out. We know about the issues of migration and conflict, the environmental stresses, unemployment, and also rural depopulation, but also the increasing challenges brought by climate change. The Mediterranean basin, as we know, is very vulnerable to drying, the drought due to global warming. So actually, I believe that Sustainable Development Goal 2 specifically is to eliminate zero hunger, but also as well as other SDG related challenges, including the current challenges posed by the pandemic. It really asking us, requires us or alert us to provide better food security and healthy diets for all the people. Even more so for the most vulnerable people in the face of all those issues and challenges. But the question is, how do we do this? And of course, we do this by working on sustainable, resilient, and inclusive food systems, which means we have to look at the people and the institutions of the food systems. And we have to develop our understanding what all the actors of the food systems we need at different levels, from the ecological level and the plant and animal health, but also to the functioning markets, so that we can, help shape consumer demand and lifestyle and the consumption patterns. On this, I wish to share a few examples of how WP, we, along with and working with governments and other partners, how we work to do this in the Mediterranean region, but also beyond. For example, we work on nutritious school feeding programs in Mediterranean countries. For example, in Tunisia, we provide local foods and encourage the creation of school gardens for education. All the meanwhile empowering women in the rural areas, in the rural agriculture communities, to connect their skills and production with the school meals programs. In Lebanon, WP provides a debit-style card, a debit card, to distribute food to refugees and to the vulnerable families, based on the data, on our understanding of where these vulnerable peoples and families, where they are. Those people that are unable to meet their basic food needs. Our program allows them to really participate in local food market. in part, of course, providing the food to the people in need, but also outside the region. For example, let's take another country in America, in Peru, a country also with a very rich culinary heritage. In that country, WFP has worked with the government to create a television program. They call it Cucina con Causa. It's cooking for a cause in English. And this TV program actually, features chefs, local families, and to demonstrate the healthy cooking and eating practices, utilizing traditional varieties and local production, local foods. And these elements come together and contribute to a sustainable local food systems. And as I've already been mentioned, and actually WFP is working with the Rome-based agencies and all other stakeholders, governments, researchers, the institutions, as well as private sector, the farmers themselves. We have teamed ourselves up, or we have mobilized ourselves to try to stage a global food system summit, that's next year, so that we can crowding the ideas, all the efforts to transform the food systems globally, to make it deliver. And then, of course, there are the challenges that we need to address, those mentioned, but also that might not be answered to now. So we are doing everything we can to do that. And WFP is actually an anchor agency for one of its 5 action tracks that is titled Building Resilience to Vulnerabilities, to Stresses and Shocks. What I mentioned already are some of the shocks. For example, the drought by global warming, but also the vulnerabilities caused by other natural disasters, but also man-made sort of conflicts and wars even. And we are, of course, very look forward to the summit. And reflecting on this, the Mediterranean region, I believe, has a whole lot to offer, to contribute to these country-level dialogues, as a member country to contribute to developing its agenda, to take into consideration all the dimensions of food systems, from production to consumption. And the Mediterranean region has a rich set of experiences and values surrounding the food system, of course, based on its natural endowment, even talking about a very rich diversity among the Mediterranean region, within the region. So I've seen food systems developed in a very contextualized way that combines tradition, but also modern technology. The powerhouse of many of the modern agriculture development. But also, for example, the Mediterranean region is also particularly very strong in deliver safe and quality food, and also ensuring the well-being of the farmers and other actors in the food supply chains and value chains. And then, of course, also to a consumer community that are more savvy or knowledgeable about how to make sustainable diet and healthy diet choices. So on that, I think the Mediterranean region has a lot to offer. And then, of course, we look forward to work with the region to draw from its experiences and good practices so that we can benefit the global community. So I think that's precisely the challenge that we face today at this forum, but in the coming forums. And I really look forward to hearing the panel talking about this. For example, on how to be resilient in an environmentally changing world, how to take leadership on sustainable agriculture production, and functioning food system and healthy lifestyles. And we need leadership in all these areas. And also on how to ensure that the Mediterranean's wonderful food economy will thrive in the centuries, in the decades to come. With that, I wish to thank you, and back to you, Mr. Polito, and thank you for your allowing me to have this opportunity. Thank you. Mr. Polito, I don't think we can hear you.
Non ti sentiamo, microfono?
Mi sentite così? Ecco, scusate, allora non funzionano le cuffie. The earphone wasn't working very well. Okay, now we'll start the panel discussion. The first speaker will be Monique Eloi. She's the General Director of the World Organization for Animal Health. And I'll put her my first question, which is this. I mean, especially now, we all are well aware of the link between human health and animal health. We have become even too familiar with the word zoonosis or spillover. But beyond the current pandemic, which are the potential risks for animal health in the Mediterranean area, who could potentially also affect human health?
Good morning, and thank you for having extended the invitation to the OIE. I'm very glad to attend this 2020 edition of your forum. And thank you also for the question. But I would like also to remind that despite the current situation, that is not a very new situation for the Mediterranean region, as since time immemorial, if I can say that, the region is really a region of confluence, of transit between several regions with different culture, different practices, and sanitary risk. Well, in addition, we are also to highlight that many countries around the Mediterranean face economic difficulties, as well as socio-political instability, which are additional factors that increase the risk of disease spreading geographically. And that is why I recognize the importance that Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Cooperation be engaged and involved also in such a matter. I would just give you one example to explain also what I say here. And please remind a very favorable situation in Maghreb, in North Africa countries, with regard to one very important episodic disease, namely food-and-borne disease. The three countries in 2014, Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, were free of this disease and were preparing to submit an application to the OIE to be recognized officially as free with or without vaccination. However, the instability in Libya in 2014 constituted a threat due to the movement of population towards to the eastern border of Tunisia, and very few weeks and months later, the first outbreaks of the disease occur first in Algeria, in Tunisia, and then in Algeria, in very few months. Well, that is one example. But unfortunately, today we have also to face two additional risks. And unfortunately, we have to also recognize that the natural barrier of the Sahara is not longer impermeable. And that means that some disease, which are very frequent in the south of Sahara, in the sub-Saharan countries, can now be introduced in the north of Africa and then in Europe because of climate change, for example, knowing that certain nomadic populations have to find new grazing areas, or because of the creation of new trade routes, and of course, as I already said, the instability in several countries. So therefore, we are ready to review some of our certainties. And that means that today, I do believe that we can really say that a disease risk anywhere is also a risk everywhere. And the COVID-19 crisis today perhaps is also the best example of that. And that means that the notion of exotic disease is completely outdated. And even if we focus on the Mediterranean region, we have also to look more broadly. Well, this implies also that we have to review the way in which we are engaged in controlling animal disease. Of course, we'll continue to invest in the control of some disease through, for example, vaccination campaign. But we must also have a more systemic approach in order to be better prepared for responding to New Year and perhaps even more serious disease risk. And this implies a multi-sectorial approach. I do believe that Mr. Reilly already highlighted that, including a better dialogue with the private sector as well as with the communities. We are not to discuss only in the scientific or technical network, but we have also to enlarge our network. And I will just, to conclude, give you one example, that is REMESA, which is a French acronym for the Animal Health Mediterranean Network, composed by all the countries around the Mediterranean, and the Italian authorities are very strongly engaged in supporting this network. And I do believe that is a good example of a network within which we engage a dialogue also between countries, between partners, in order to identify the priorities and to find together, to identify together solution and act together, because discussing is very good, but acting is certainly more efficient than only talking. So therefore, I do believe that once again, the Mediterranean is a very important region because that is really, as I said, a confluence of many roads, but we have also to think broader in order also to take into consideration what happened around or behind the Mediterranean borders. Up to you, Monsieur Polito.
First question, our first question, you can hear me now, to Ms. Marcela Villarreal. She's a director of partnerships and UN collaboration division of the Food and Agriculture Organization. And Marcela, in the claim of the United Nations 2030 agenda of leaving no one behind, there is a strong interlinkage among the Sustainable Development Goals in a holistic approach to development. Many areas of the world, poverty, food insecurity, and health influence each other in a bad way. The Mediterranean is no exception to this. How FAO intervenes in rural areas of the Mediterranean to address simultaneously the challenges of the Sustainable Development Goals, which is number 1, zero poverty, number 2, zero hunger, number 3, health and well-being.
Thank you very much. That's a really important question. Thank you for the invitation to this important forum. I think you said it very clearly, Antonio. There is a very close linkage between SDGs 1, 2, and 3. But then, of course, the issues they address, they are also very much interlinked with the rest of the agenda of the SDGs. And therefore, we need to understand a little bit the context around these SDGs and why there can be a vicious circle created around poverty, food insecurity, and poor health. So in order to be able to address this vicious circle, we need to look at the context and on the underpinning issues that will be affecting all of them. We have to think in this systemic way if we want to address this vicious circle. So we know that food insecurity, unfortunately, has been growing in the last 4 years. And the reasons for this growth is because of climate change, very importantly, conflict, another issue also in the Mediterranean, and economic downturn together. And then, of course, these three issues are also very interlinked to poverty and also clearly to poor health outcomes. Now, we need to understand other underlying issues, and I would like to really point out, for example, gender inequalities. Gender inequalities underpin poverty, they underpin food insecurity, and of course, they underpin poor health outcomes through a number of mechanisms. And let me just address one mechanism, which is unequal access to resources. In the Mediterranean region, we see a major gender inequality in access to resources. And let me take the example of land. In the southern and eastern part of the Mediterranean, women's land titles are only 3 to 7%. Of all agricultural holdings, women own only 3 to 7%, eastern and southern. Where in the northern part of the Mediterranean, the situation is a little better, but still far from the desired 50%, which is ranging between 11 and 31%, very far from the ideal. Also, women's participation in parliament, which is so important to create the legal framework, the enabling environment for countries to be able to address the interlinkages between SDG 1 and 2 and 3. Women in parliament in the southern part of the Mediterranean is 18%, whereas in the northern part of the Mediterranean is 27%. So here again, we need to do much more to address gender inequality as one of the underlying factors of that vicious circle. So what are we doing concretely in the Mediterranean region as FAO? Many things, but let me just point out to a few of these, which I think are particularly important. Resilience. Strengthen resilience of rural populations is very high up in our agenda in order to address these three together. And that includes obviously access to productive resources, which is for all, for everybody, women and men, urban and rural populations, populations from different origins. And this is the concept also of leaving no one behind. Strengthening resilience through equal opportunity, equal access to resources. For rural women, it's very fundamental. And in this case, we point to rural women's economic empowerment and of course, access to land. We are developing a whole suite of policies together with the countries to be able to strengthen family farmers organizations. And this again points to strengthening resilience. So access to markets, incentives. And we are now developing the regional action plan for family farming in the North Africa and Middle East region. We also need to address the link between peace and food security. This is one of the underlying, so conflict is one of the underlying causes that is affecting directly poverty, food insecurity, and health naturally. In Libya, for example, the number of severely, acutely insecure people has risen to 17% recently, and this is from 11% just back in 2015. So in order to address peace and food security nexus, we have launched an alliance in which we bring in the Nobel Peace Laureates against hunger to help us in this endeavor. And this has been supported by Italy and the Italian cooperation, and it's giving really good results. Other very concrete examples of what we are doing in the Mediterranean to address this vicious circle Very importantly, what we can do in the rural areas support, for example, the smallholder dairy and sheep milk systems, which is fundamental. We're controlling major zoonoses, and this is, of course, one of the topics that is of our interest today, and Monique also referred to this. And these zoonoses are affecting animal and human health, and we are giving priority to brucellosis, controlling in animals, of course, through vaccination, testing, and in the food chain, throughout the food chain, through heat treatment, if consumed at home, or processing pasteurization. Almost all the southern and eastern Mediterranean countries have difficulties in this control. So this is one of the areas in which we are providing some support. We are also addressing neglected zoonoses, diseases where WHO has a roadmap for control, and that are an issue in the Mediterranean. So FAO promotes One Health platforms, and this, of course, we do in very, very close partnership with the OIE, with the WHO, naturally. So these platforms are to address rabies, leishmaniasis, echinocosis, and which is also an issue in the region.
Marcella,
and of course, other.
The time is closing.
And I'm finalizing with also AMR, antimicrobial resistance, which is an issue, and it's growing, and it will grow into the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcella. Now the floor to Ayub Al-Jawaldeh. He's the regional advisor for nutrition of the Regional Office for Eastern Mediterranean of the World Health Organization. Mr. Al-Jawaldeh, the current pandemic has shown that not all communities are affected, are impacted in the same way by an outbreak linked to an infection disease. Taking the Mediterranean region as an example, considering the direct impact of habits, diets, lifestyles of community and societies on people's health, how important are these in determining vulnerability to pandemics today, but even in the future?
Thank you very much, Antonio, and good morning to everybody. We are very pleased to participate in this important forum. And also, we thank you for the organizers. As you know, WHO is the leading organization in the Eastern Mediterranean region in the area of health. But also, when it comes to nutrition and agriculture and food security, we work very closely with FAO, UNICEF, WFP, and other key partners. As you know, also, governments and partners across the Middle East or Eastern Mediterranean region are acting to protect citizens from coronavirus 19. These crucial efforts will save many lives. However, measures needed to slow the transmission of the disease are resulting in hardship for many vulnerable families. In particular, the COVID-19 pandemic is having worrying impact on household income, food supply chain, health services, and schools. And the recent released global report on food crisis 2020 highlighted how serious the impact of the pandemic that could be countries already facing on food crisis. And it's likely to have a major negative impact on the quantity, frequency, and diversity of the food, especially offered to children, and also creating a new food crisis or worsening existing ones. According to the latest estimates, nearly we have 110 million people undernourished. And also we have 7.6 million children under 5 suffering from wasting, 20 million suffering from stunting, and also 5.4 million children that are suffering from overweight and obesity. So if we take all these figures, you can see the challenge we are facing in the region. In fact, we have 3 groups of countries. We have high-income countries, middle-income countries, and low-income countries. And the most affected when it comes to undernutrition is the low and middle-income country. Of course, the families are, especially in those countries, facing really big challenge to offer the food or to have access, or also the variety of the food and also the safety of and nutritious food. So for your organization signed a regional statement by the regional director to address nutrition and food security to cope with COVID-19. And the four organizations call upon governments, international development partners, donors, and all stakeholders to tackle the issue relating to the availability, access, and affordability of safe and nutritious food. Of course, action to protect the nutrition status of the most vulnerable families, especially pregnant, lactating women, young children across the region, while implementing appropriate infection prevention and control measures. Here, I would like to highlight that we have a regional strategy in Eastern Mediterranean region developed by WHO in collaboration with our key partners. And the strategies adapted to cope with COVID-19. It addresses 6 areas for action. The first one, ensure sustainable, resilient food system and healthy diet. Aligned health system providing universal coverage of essential nutrition action. Also focus on social protection and nutrition education, trade and investment for improved nutrition, safe and supportive environment for nutrition at all age groups, and also strengthen the nutrition governance and accountability. And here, I want to give examples on how the sustainable and resilient food system for health could help or the communities or the governments to cope with this pandemic. First, reform food system. Food system, and we have here a good model developed in Oman. You know, how the food system can really help through promoting healthy diet, diversity of food, and addresses the most vulnerable groups. And of course, when we talk about food system, I'll give you an example how food system linked to food security linked to health. For example, most of the regions, especially in high-income countries, they import food, 70 or 80%. And one of the key challenges, of course, non-communicable disease and obesity. And we found that trans fatty acid is a big challenge. High salt intake is a big challenge. Also, when we talk about vitamins and minerals, there is anemia is very common in the region. And we need to think strategically with biofortification. We need to work with the agriculture sector to produce really some food product with diversity, can cope with the climate change challenges, with the weather in the region. Also, reduce food loss and food waste. This is another area we need to look at it. You know, 30% of the food is being lost through food preparation, through improper harvesting or marketing. And here, if we invest...
Mr. Al-Jawalde, can I recall you the time? Sorry about that.
The last minute is we need also to reduce the intake of saturated fat, sugar, salt, trans fat, and improve food safety and address antimicrobial resistance. So all these can work together to invest in food system. And here we can link food system with food security, nutrition, and agriculture. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Al-Jawalde. Now the floor is to Stefano Scarpetta. He's Director of Employment, Labor, and Social Affairs of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. Mr. Scarpetta, someone said we are what we eat. Maybe it was a little bit exaggerating, but that's for sure that a link between food and health is inextricably. What opportunities do you see for the health system and agri-food system together to work for better health?
Thank you very much. Good morning to everyone. It's really a great pleasure to participate in this forum. Let me just start with what is a very famous quote. Let food be Thai medicine and medicine be Thai food, which is often ascribed to Hippocrates. Healthy and safe food is indeed, I think, at the core of good health. I think it was stressed before by Ayub Jalawed, there are many countries, even in the region we're talking about, who are undernourished. At the same time, we also see unhealthy diets in a number of other countries with a significant rise, for example, in obesity rate. Just in the EU 27 countries, we just released a report last week on Health at a Glance Europe. More than 1 in 5 adults are now obese. And the situation is somewhat better in the Mediterranean countries, as has been recalled, thanks to the Mediterranean diet. But some of the trends we do observe also are a major source of concern. Obesity poses a sizable economic burden on our society. At UCD, we have calculated that over the next 30 years, more than 8% of the overall health budget of OECD countries is likely to be spent to treat the consequence of overweight and obesity, such as cardiovascular diseases, cancers, and diabetes. At the same time, due to its detrimental effect on life expectancy, on labor market participation, on productivity, on average, overweights and obesity tend to reduce the GDP in the whole OECD countries by 3.3%. This corresponds to more than the GDP of a country like Spain, just to give you a sense of the magnitude of the problems we are facing. At the same time, food safety has important economic consequences. I think the World Bank estimates that the cost of unsafe food exceed 110 billion annually in low and middle income countries, with 15 billions due to treating foodborne illness and 95 billions is due to the loss of productivity. So now the good news is that a number of countries have introduced policies to create a safe and healthy food environment, and they use mass media campaigns, healthy procurement policies, school-based intervention, and food safety regulation. These public health interventions, I think, have proven to be very cost-effective. For example, for every euro invested in mass media campaigns, around 4 euros are returned in terms of increased GDP. And at the same time, the evidence suggests that the implementation of food safety and hygiene training programs for food handlers in catering facility, for example, reduce microbial proliferation by more than 30%. So it's worth noting also that the policy rely heavily on the food and the agricultural sector. In fact, these interventions are often perceived as a threat to the agro-food industry, but we believe that they actually create many opportunities. Mass media campaigns, for example, highlight the importance of fruit and vegetable consumption, and these generate consumer demand for these products. Healthy procurement schemes present also a sizable market. In the public sector, expenditure on food and drink procurement in the EU is estimated to be around 82 billion, for example. The EU school fruit, vegetable, and meat schemes create also new revenue streams for the agricultural sector, which is equivalent to some 145 million of fruit and vegetables and 105 million for dairy products in the period of 2019-2020 school year. And we are seeing also the food industry actually capitalizing on changing consumer trends. Let me give you just one example. Unilever has set a target of 1 billion in annual sales in its plant-based food, and it seeks to serve the growing number of consumers reducing their meat and dairy intake. The last point I want to share is actually the one of collaboration between the health and agriculture and between government and policy. I strongly believe that public-private partnership, if used, as they use in many countries, can actually encourage voluntary food reformulation. A couple of examples. Chile, the Ministry of Health and Education worked with the Federation of Independent Street Markets to provide communities with healthy food options and information. In the US, the FDA works with a range of academic and industry stakeholders to develop and deliver food safe training. So I think that together we can really create a health promoting food system that can benefit both the health, but also the agro-food industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefano. And now I will start the second round of our discussion. I may ask you all to be short at this time in order to keep up with the program and with our schedule. So second question for Monique Lois, World Organization for Animal Health. An important strategy to mitigate the risk we are talking about to the animal health is to strengthen controls in order to enhance the capacity of containing and preventing diseases. How your organization is engaged in the Mediterranean region and all over the world to support developing countries in this field, in this domain. What's your mandate to ensure the safety of animal worldwide?
Thank you for this additional question. I would say that perhaps the first commitment is to develop global strategies. And as I said with the first question, we have to develop that through a multi-sectorial approach. And that is why we have joined our force with WHO and FAO within our tripartite collaboration. And very soon, UNEP will join us also, so that also the environmental sector be better considered through this intersectoral approach. But from a point of view, developing strategies and implementing these strategies are not enough. Because I will likely today very strongly state that we have first to ensure that countries have a robust and comprehensive health security system. Because I do believe that it's really an illusion to continue to develop global strategy to fight disease or to address any risk if countries don't have the appropriate structure to implement those strategies. Therefore, as I say, we need to act also at field level with the country. And therefore, previously I said that the commitment and the engagement of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Cooperation is very important. I do believe also that the commitment of Ministries of Finance is also very important, because they should consider that some targeted investment in veterinary services, for example, or in health services, human as well as veterinary services, is also important, as well as in the scientific institute, international cooperation, because we need to provide support to our member countries to be also better prepared to face with such situation. And at the OIE, we have one specific program, namely the PVS, Performance of Veterinary Services Pathways, which is a way also to provide, to analyze the gaps and provide recommendations to a member country so that it could be better prepared to face a crisis and to be more resilient. So therefore, we develop programs, we develop training programs also, because education is something important, capacity building program, of course, and I do believe that is something important, because our approach is not only through a multi-sectoral approach, but also through a multilateralism approach, because the cooperation, the international cooperation, is also something very crucial for supporting the implementation of our program through the operationalization of the One Health concept. And if I have time a little later, I would like also to highlight how this One Health concept and the operationalization, the concrete operationalization of this One Health concrete is very, very important for addressing any sanitary risk.
Thank you, Monique. Now the second question to Marcela Villarreal, Food and Agriculture Organization. With the boost of the Italian government, your organization leads the Food Coalition initiative in response to the threats of COVID-19 pandemic to food security. The initiative is based on the idea that unemployment, drop of incomes, price volatility are jeopardizing access to food in developing countries with negative effects, both in short and long term. Can you describe which strategies and tools are you applying to the Food Coalition, and what role for food system in this framework? Problem with the echo. Now we hear you.
I'll unmute myself. Okay, thank you to the organizers. Okay, thank you. That is a very important question. Absolutely, the Food Coalition originates from the concern by the Italian government of the effect of this pandemic on food security and food systems. Initially, we were hearing responses around, of course, health and jobs, but it soon became very clear that this epidemic is having and will have a major effect on food security. We already know that from here to the end of the year, we could have up to 132 million additional people going hungry because of the effects of the pandemic. So the Food Coalition is born to address the demand from countries that starting contacting us very soon, mainly of the South, for expertise, how to address what can we do to address specific impacts on the food systems, like, for example, impacts arising from restrictions on trade and movement, disruptions of value chains, difficulties in access to markets, specifically by the smallholders, difficulties in accessing inputs for agricultural production, unilateral trade policies banning imports or exports, consequent food price volatility. So in order to prevent the health crisis from becoming a food crisis and a long-term food crisis, it became clear that there was a need to have a mechanism to be able to mobilize expertise as needed by the countries, and also to engage in a real policy dialogue around these issues, and to mobilize funds. So this is what the Food Coalition is about. Up to now, we've had a great interest. So of course, after Italy, we have 39 countries that have expressed their interest or are already supporting. So the first ones to express interest were United States, China, Russian Federation, Israel, Nigeria, Costa Rica, Netherlands, and many others. We also had expressions of interest from the Vatican, from farmers' organizations, from civil society, even from individuals who wanted to contribute. So this is very high up in the interest of our stakeholders and very high up in our agenda. So as Vice Minister Del Re said, the Food Coalition was launched on the 5th of November recently with the participation of Prime Minister Conte, the Deputy Prime Minister of the Netherlands, the Vice Minister Del Re herself. Up to now, the kind of demand that we have been receiving from our member countries is how to increase resilience, like for example, around desert locusts, how to address food losses and waste created or increased by the pandemic, the value chain disruption, small agricultural production are among the ones that we're hearing the most. And of course, to finalize, we're delighted at FAO that for the G20, Italy has put in the Food Coalition as a major element to address the food security chapter. So we hope to collaborate with all of you in order to make this Food Coalition a success. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcela. Now a question to Mr. Al-Jawaldeh, World Health Organization. Is it connected?
Yes, yes.
Yes, okay. My question is, let's take a wider look at the effects on food and nutrition on public health. How are non-communicable diseases related to food and nutrition in the Mediterranean area? How WHO is engaged in this region to promote better health based on food and nutrition, and which gaps and needs are to be addressed?
Thank you very much for this question. In fact, this is one of our major priority in the region, which has been translated through non-communicable disease strategies or nutrition intervention. And as we know, in addition to SDGs 2, we are also nutrition act as an enabler for health-related goals, and it has a direct link with NCDs, women and children health, and other programs. If you look at the top human risks factor, malnutrition and dietary risk, they are coming first. So number one, malnutrition, dietary risk number two, then high blood pressure, then tobacco, then high fasting, and diabetes or high body mass index obesity. So unhealthy diet contributes significantly to the non-communicable disease in the region. Of course, if we look at the death in our region, 2/3 are related to non-communicable disease. And now countries realize that investment in a nutrition and healthy diet is one of the key strategic intervention in addition to other risk factors like physical inactivity and tobacco use. Now, if you look at how nutrition is being addressed or integrated through non-communicable disease, of course, we tried address unhealthy diet through cost-effective intervention. And one of the key program is to reduce trans fatty acid and also reduce salt intake. You know, for every gram salt we reduce, we save around 17% of the heart attack. And also they found that the nutrition has a direct or healthy diet is one of the major preventive measures, especially increased consumption of fruits and vegetables. And here I want to highlight how really agriculture can make sure that the fruits and vegetables consumed by the public is also safe, is low in pesticides. And also we would here stress on 3 pillars for the food system, which make sure or which will help to make the food accessible to the public. Here we focus on food supply, food environment, and consumer behavior. And for food supply, for example, food procurement, especially when we talk about subsidy, government usually subsidize unhealthy diet. They subsidize the sugar, wheat flour, especially in poor countries, while they could maybe play a major role to shift supply to fruits and vegetables, to whole grain or pulses. Although they are low-income countries, but they could maybe link it with the chronic disease. Also, we talk about food environment. You know, the people, especially in different groups at risk, like children. Children, for example, they go to schools. And school feeding program is one of a major program which can be linked to school gardening, and then it can be linked to offer healthy diet rich in fruits, vegetables, and then we can contribute to shift the consumption from unhealthy diet to healthy diet. Of course, high sugar intake is one of the main causes of obesity and cancer. And countries or member states now, they're adding taxes, and these taxes in order to reduce the consumption and the shift, or you use these taxes, for example, to support health program or to support the essential health services. Of course, consumer behavior and awareness is very important. And here we need to help or advocate to the community and to the family about the importance of diversify of food intake. So nowadays, there is a link between unhealthy diet and obesity in the region. Shifting to fish and shifting to marine food is really a good and healthy attempt.
Mr. Al-Jawalde, you are...
Okay, I conclude that NCD has a direct link with the nutrition program in our region. And of course, we work with FAO and WFP and UNICEF to make sure the food through a safety net program also offer healthy diet. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Al-Jawalde. Now, the last question to Mr. Scarpetta, OECD. During this crisis, this COVID-19 crisis, we have heard calls in many countries for a reshoring or nearshoring of essential supply and value chains. Can such localization provide the robustness and resilience in supplies that we seek? And is there a difference in the implication for medical supplies and food supplies?
No, thank you very much. Antonio, I think it's fair to say that international trade was already in trouble before the pandemic. And I'm just afraid that the COVID-19 has probably exacerbated some of the existing trends and tensions. At the same time, I think it has also added a number of new concerns that you were also alluding to, but also over the resilience of our global supply and value chains. I think it should be stressed that many of the challenges actually affecting the global supply chain during COVID also affected domestic value chain. Think about the road transport in Europe or the meat processing in the US. But it is important to note that despite being under heavy stress, the global supply chain actually proved remarkably resilient, and I would say actually essential in providing goods necessary to tackle the pandemic. Let me give the example of the unprecedented surge in demand that led to the shortages of face masks. Both the global production and trade of masks actually increased more than tenfold globally. The pandemic also showed us that no country can produce all the goods it needs. For example, for every euro or German export of COVID-19 goods, for example, face masks, ventilators, pharmaceuticals, Germany at the same time imported 0.72 of COVID-19 goods. Even to administer a vaccine, several upstream products like vials, syringes have to be combined from a highly fragmented global production network. So global supply chain are part of the solution to managing risks and shocks and for helping to drive into what I think has to be an inclusive recovery. When we use our global trade model, we find that a localized regime scenario where production chains are localized domestically is not only less efficient than the one where production chains remain global, but is actually much less resilient to shocks. So we have to be wary of the policy instrument available to localize production, essentially tariff, export restrictions, subsidies. This policy can actually exacerbate tensions and have already slowed down the growth before the pandemic. And I think it will not make our economy more robust and more resilient to shocks. So what can be done to make a value chain more robust? Very quickly, in the short run, we must ensure that goods continue flowing across borders, even in the crisis situation. And we have already seen many governments implementing what is called trade facilitation measures. And this is necessary response and should continue. Trade facilitation is particularly important for time-sensitive products. And pharmaceutical and food are definitely two good examples of such a kind of product. For both agro-food and pharmaceutical products, bridging gaps in trade facilitation performance between exporters and importers can increase actually trade by 1 to 4%, which is a pretty significant effect. In the long run, I think another important area is transparency and information sharing on policy measures as well as on market conditions. One example, in 2011, the G20 created the Agricultural Market Information System, IMIS, hosted by FAO and the OECD. And since then, AMIS has monitored the levels and supply of key food commodities, as well as government policies that could affect these supplies. And this has increased confidence in global markets and kept government for basically individual reaction and introducing export restrictions. So going forward, we need more such information sharing, whether through dedicated platforms such as the AMIS or the existing WTO policy notification system. Mm-hmm. I think with this measure, we can really strengthen our global value chain and make sure that they can continue to provide us with the product we need to tackle the pandemic or other challenges we might be facing in the future.
Thank you, Stefano. Now I have 4 questions from the audience for you, and I need a very telegraphic answer, 2 minutes each to stay in time. The first question is for Monique Lois. It comes from a researcher of Bari University in Italy. In the framework of the World Organization for Animal Health, what's the role played by Italy in the Mediterranean area, and what are the strengths in the fight against zoonotic disease at risk of introduction in Europe?
That is for me the opportunity to highlight that for our programs implemented in the region, Italy probably is the first partner of the World Organization for Animal Health. So therefore the role is really very crucial, not only for our organization, but also for the countries around the Mediterranean, particularly on the south of the Mediterranean. And a few minutes ago, I highlighted the Animal Health Mediterranean Network, REMESA, which is also strongly supported by Italy, not only from a financial point of view, but also thanks to the secondment of colleagues. And in a few weeks, we'll also strengthen this collaboration through a memorandum of understanding with the Istituto Profilactico of Sicilia, which will provide us more scientific and technical expertise so that this animal health network be more efficient. But that is also for me the importance to highlight one specific strength, I do believe, of the Italian authorities, namely the amazing network of the Zooprophylactico Institute, because they are not only engaged in controlling or in supporting the program for tackling animal diseases, they are also involved in human health expertise, environmental expertise. And as I said also a few minutes ago, this One Health approach is something already well considered by this scientific network, and that is a great support for our organization and therefore for the member countries.
Thank you, Monique. And now a question for Marcela Villarreal, and it comes from Tamara Lea, Associate Professor, Institute of Pedology, Agrochemistry, and Soil Protection, NDMO, Moldova. And the question is, which innovative technologies could be applied to face the adverse effects of pandemics linked to food security gaps in the Mediterranean? 2 minutes.
Well, there are many, actually many. We're expanding on technologies, but let me say that for us, early warning systems are a priority. So be it for avian flu, now nobody talks anymore about avian flu as it happened some years ago, because we put in place a system of early warning, including the different governments, but down to the farmer level, including with smartphones, to be able to identify very early on the first signs. And this applies also to others like the desert locusts ongoing right now, fall armyworm that is devastating crops throughout Africa and now also in Asia. So the clue here, I believe, is to have an integration of the knowledge that comes from the farmers and giving them the opportunity to be able to interact with these international systems, including through their smartphones, including, of course, as Monique said, you need training, you need capacity development. But if we have in place a system of early warning and traceability, we will be doing huge amounts of progress in addressing these pandemics.
Thank you, Marcela. And now, Mr. Al-Jawaldeh, the question for you comes from Vesna Jablanovic, Professor of Economics, Faculty of Agriculture, University of Belgrade. And the question is, which direction should be followed by national health systems, including also the One Health approach, in terms of governance and financing to face the COVID-19 pandemic in the Mediterranean region?
Yes, this is really a good question. And here, when we talk about universal health coverage, that means we need to have access of all people to the essential health services. And of course, when we talk about food system and financing, we know that unhealthy diet like fast food, soft drinks, these are really the major causes of obesity and NCD. This is why we encourage government to add sin taxes on this unhealthy diet and use this revenue of to finance the essential health services and also to promote a healthy diet. So essential health services package now is being implemented in many countries. And through these services, we try to mobilize resources and to address those resources to provide or focusing on prevention. Another example also, when we talk about biofortification. Fortification also, as we know that most of the people, they don't have access to the essential minerals and vitamins. Of course, we hope that biofortification could be a solution, but adding or enforcing or supporting or financing the fortification to the food highly consumed is encouraged as well, and ensure access of all people to the healthy or to the nutrients they need. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Al-Jawaldeh. And now a question for Stefano Scarpetta. Unfortunately, I don't have the name of the person who made it, but the question is, the COVID-19 pandemic requires public funding to ensure a comprehensive response. Every country or region must develop specific processes for allocating budget funds to the response. Please explain these specific processes in the Mediterranean region.
Thank you very much, Antonio. This is an excellent question that unfortunately I think would require much more than 2 minutes. Let me be very telegraphic. I think in the region and I think globally, we are still in the midst of a major crisis, an unprecedented crisis, which is an health, economic, and social crisis. I think the good news to some extent in the region and I think globally, major resources are and will be put in place. But I think to some extent the answer to the question was in the question itself, because each country has to find the way to address the emergency in the very short term, but also to some extent, in my view, address the major sort of systemic issues that unfortunately the crisis has revealed, including the significant disparities in the impact of this crisis from a health, from an economic and from a social point of view. I think the package of measures has to be set at the national level. And I think it is important to make sure that it's a comprehensive approach that deals with the short-term challenges of the emergency, in which unfortunately we still are, but also I think addressing the most structural issues. But I think there is also an important international component. We need more than ever international cooperation along a wide set of fronts. We have been discussing that in this panel, but let me add one more element. There are good news about the vaccine that might be soon be available. At the same time, we need to make sure that the vaccine will be distributed to all of those in need. And for that, we need international cooperation for the production, but actually also for the distribution, not only, of course, in the more advanced countries, but actually in the low and middle income countries. So I think we need a comprehensive strategy at the national level, but we need to strengthen to make sure that the effort that has been made so far in terms of international cooperation continues also in the new phases we are all facing, including on the implementation and the distribution of the vaccine, which is certainly a good news that gives us some hope that we will eventually get out of this major crisis.
Thank you, Stefano, and thank you all for the clarity of your answers and also for the time, because we are basically on schedule. And I will ask the last speaker, Giorgio Marapodi, the Director General of Development Cooperation of the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation. And I will ask him to conclude our discussions. He has got 10 minutes to speak. Please, Mr. Marapodi.
Grazie, Antonio. I think that I will use less than those 10 minutes, I hope. It is, I would say, it is always burdensome to have the task of drawing conclusion of when there is a seminar, a panel, a webinar, such intense as it was the one that we have been attending today. I will try. The first thing that I would like to say is that I have listened carefully to all the speeches. I was here, and I see that all the speakers shed lights on issues that are so extremely relevant today. And these are the thoughts, the ideas that have been put on the table are very useful because we in a difficult time like the one that we are living, we need of this dialogue, of this debate among experts, researchers, and policymakers to come out all together stronger than before. I heard views and direct experiences about the nexus between health on the one side, agriculture and nutrition on the other sides. All the aspects of this nexus have been addressed. Animal health, human health, diets and lifestyle, food systems, that is on which we are working for. I am a member of the advisory committee that is preparing the UN Secretary General Food System Summit. So the discussion that we had today, it is very useful to me personally, also from that point of view. It was addressed also the aspect of the value chain and of course the socio-economic impact. That is something that we have, as Italian Development Corporation, we have tried to put in front line since the very beginning of our action and the very discussion after the breakout of the pandemic. Good health and sustainable agriculture are both essential in the fight against poverty. According to the WHO, substantially improved health conditions are a prerequisite to break out of the circle of poverty. On the other side of the coin, we know that around 80% of the extreme poor worldwide live in rural areas. These facts confirm the importance of tackling development challenges outlined in the UN Agenda 2030 through a holistic approach. This is why the idea of the nexus shall be promoted and pursued in development cooperation approaches and strategies, and we are trying to do it. Such an approach shall be based on the widest collaboration among sectors to develop coherent solutions. In line with the idea of green economics, stakeholders at different levels shall coordinate to align the balance of the ecosystem with that of the human health. We need this coordination. We need it to link the multiple interactions among the different challenges: environmental change, agricultural productivity, crop quality, population level food availability, of which we have heard so many times in our discussion today, dietary intake, and health outcomes. I was very glad to hear from Mr. Al-Jawalid that he was talking very much of healthy diets or unhealthy diets, and not of healthy food and unhealthy food. As we have heard today, in this, it is time for agriculture, nutrition, and health to join forces in pursuit of the common goal of improving human well-being and livelihoods. The challenge is to improve food environments by making balanced diets more readily available and affordable, especially for vulnerable groups. And then food systems should play a role in all forms of malnutrition. The part they play in driving the overweight and obesity crisis may not yet be fully appreciated, especially in countries that have until recently been struggling to reach sound economic growth. The Italian cooperation is fully aware that the COVID-19 pandemic has showed the fragility of a model of development that should be reoriented to better address the well-being of humans and that of the natural capital. In this framework, agriculture is the human-animal ecosystem interface, and as such, it is increasingly impacted by the evolution and emergence of pathogens, not only those affecting humans, but also plants and animals. As agriculture is the backbone of the economy in most of the developing countries, our goal is to ensure the agricultural and rural development strategies are implemented so that food systems and ecosystems are reconciled. This is key to ensure real sustainable development in line with the 2030 agenda. Italy has reinforced its traditional commitment on the fundamental issues of health, food security, and social development through the launching, and we heard this very well also from Marcela Villarreal, the launching and the promotion of the Food Coalition, an alliance among countries united by the common will to work together to prevent the health crisis from turning into a food crisis caused by obstacles to access to food. As presidency of the G20 next year, actually starting in a few days time, our agenda will hinge on three main concepts: people, planet, and prosperity. And this means taking care of people and the planet in a holistic fashion. We deem it important that the G20 considers the impact of the crisis on the most vulnerable countries, above all in the African continent. I'm convinced that all the recommendations, I conclude, and ideas collected today could be used as a base to reiterate our commitment to work together joint efforts and upscaling results. Of course, there is still a lot to do, but I would therefore encourage CM Bari, with which we are working so much and well together, to follow up on the outcomes of this forum and to start developing an initiative tackling the nutrition, agriculture, health nexus in fragile rural communities of the Mediterranean priority countries for the Italian cooperation, so that we can work on a new initiative trying to set a new model for our action. I hope I didn't take too much time, and I give it back to you, Antonio. Thanks. Many thanks to all of you.
Thank you, Mr. Marapodi. We are at the end of this forum. Let me thank all the speakers for sharing their knowledge and their ideas, and also to the audience for the attention and the question we got from the audience. Looking forward to next year forum, hopefully in Bari, in presence. Thank you to you all.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Good day.
Thank you, and thank you.
Thank you to
I look
everyone.
forward to collaborating with the colleagues here.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much for your support. Thank you.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Bye. Thank you.
Arrivederci, grazie.
Grazie a tutti.
Grazie mille, all'anno
Grazie.
prossimo.
Thank you. Bye-bye.